Can you please, good morning, everyone. I'm going to ask you 3 questions. The first question, I want you to tap once if you agree that we are in a housing crisis. Not twice if you think we should do something about it. And count 3 times if you support initiatives that fund affordable housing for those who need it most. Thank you, everyone. And now I'm going to pass it to Courtney, who's going to be online giving a presentation about what the regional bond is.
Thanks so much, Ruby. Just 1 second. Are you all sharing my slides or I'm bringing them up?
You were going to present on your own.
Ah, that's right. Let me bring up the slides. While I'm doing that, good morning, everyone. My name is Courtney Welch. I am the Advocacy Manager with St. Mary's Center, and I am going to touch on, 1, what the regional bond is, how it's going to work, and how we can make sure that it actually passes. And 1 moment while I bring up my presentation for you all. While I'm getting this up, 1 second. While I'm bringing this up, I actually want to talk about what BAFA is to give a little background. And so in 2019, BAFA was, AB 1487 was signed into law, and that formed BAFA. And BAFA stands for Bay Area Housing Finance Authority. And let me bring this up. And so with the creation of BAFA, it allows the 9 Bay Area counties to work together on affordable housing initiatives, and including, but not limited to, the consideration of a regional housing funding measures. And the first crack at that is this housing bond that we'll be discussing today. And so can everyone see the presentation? Okay, 1 second. How about now? Is it coming up? Can everyone see? Can I get a nod? Okay, I can see that you all can see. Okay. So the regional housing bond will be on the November 5th, 2024 ballot. So the general with the presidential election. And so there's actually 2 pieces to the bond. There is ACA 1, which is a constitutional amendment. What this will do is this will lower the threshold that it takes to pass this regional bond. At this time, it takes a supermajority for bonds to pass. Because of this, it's been very challenging in the past to actually pass bonds both on a state and local level. It's been very challenging, and it has blocked many municipalities from actually passing their own bonds to have funding for all types of different projects. So some of these projects would include funding for affordable housing, transportation, resilience, and other public infrastructure projects. So it is essential that we pass ACA 1, not just to lower this bond, but just any future bond measures that might be considered. And this is, Let's bring up the next slide, 1 second. So what will the regional bond do? So what is being proposed is that this is a $10 billion regional housing bond. It will produce and preserve up to 45,000 affordable homes. This will occur over a decade, but over the lifetime of these developments, over 500,000 low-income households will be able to be housed. Additionally, it'll have a positive impact on the region's economy through creation of 29,000 jobs annually. And so the estimate is that will generate over 600 million in state and local taxes and 2.3 billion in annual income for the state. Additionally, with the passage of the bond, we will be able to access additional 38.1 billion in affordable housing sources through other funding sources. And that is to note, there's being two amounts are being considered for the bond. All of the highlights that I just mentioned, that is if it passes at the $10 billion level. There is possibility that we can move forward on a $20 billion level. If it passed at the $20 billion level, all of those metrics that I mentioned would be doubled. To note, Alameda County would potentially get an allocation of $978 million to itself. So again, that's at the $10 billion level. If we pass it at the $20 billion level, that would double. So we're talking about almost $2 billion would be allocated to Alameda County.
Yeah.
Yeah, yay, that's good. As you can see here, this is a map of the 9 Bay Area counties that are part of this regional bond measure. These are some of the affordable homes in pre-development. As you can see in Alameda County, where we are, there's almost 8,000 affordable homes in the pre-development pipeline. There's 106 developments. That's just us alone. As you can see over the 9 Bay Area counties, we have most of the more populated areas, Santa Clara County, San Francisco City and County. We're talking about several thousands of homes that are in the pipeline that would be able to be funded through this affordable housing bond. And so, yeah, that is what I'm going to touch on today. And I'm going to pass it back to you all to keep the forum going.
Thank you very much for such a great presentation. So we're going to move right along with our program. And I'd like to bring up our first guest speaker, Housing Director for Alameda County, Michelle Starratt, to give us an idea of what her plans are for 2024 for housing.
I don't think mine. Not yet.
Chris's mic is working, so I'm muted. Hi, everybody. My name is Michelle Starratt. And I am the housing director for Alameda County. And I've been with the county for a long time, like 20 plus years. And this is a really exciting moment because I get to share with you both what's happening with the new bond, which Courtney just talked about, but also what we've accomplished over the last few years. And so let's go to the next slide. Here we go. You guys see that? You know, I can only share my screen. Would that work better?
It's working.
No, it's working. Okay, great. So just very quickly, I'm going to probably truncate the back half of this. Because I'm not going to go into as much detail about the bond because Courtney just did. But I'm also going to be asking you guys some questions, and hopefully you guys can ask us some questions. I do want to let everyone know that I have leave here at about 11:20 to 11:25. And I'm leaving Jennifer, wave Jennifer, and Tony and Pauline from my staff here to help answer any questions. I've got to get to the housing summit in Castro Valley, which I think you all are gonna watch in this room, but I gotta get to Castro Valley. So I'm gonna be leaving here a little bit before the presentation's over. Chris will probably still be presenting at that point in time, but thank you so much for having me. If I don't get a chance to say it later. Next slide. So we're gonna talk a little bit about how Measure A1, which was also a general obligation bond passed by the voters in 2016, next slide, how it has impacted our community. And so really quickly, it was $580 million. The vast majority, 425 million, went to new construction of rental housing. And then we also had a few other little programs. We had a first-time homebuyer program, down payment money. We had housing preservation, which is really rehab or single-family homes, especially for seniors and disabled homeowners. We had an acquisition program, and we are about to launch our innovation program actually in the next month. Next slide. So how much did Measure A1 cost the voters? It's a 20-year bond, which means that for 20 years, there will be a tax on all real estate in Alameda County. And it's coming out to be about $9 per $100,000 of assessed value. So what does that mean? It means that if you bought your house, 30 years ago, and it's assessed at $150,000, it means that you're paying about $15 a year. If there you go. Sorry, thank you. If you bought your house last year and it cost $1 million, it means that you're spending $90 a year for 20 years. So I just want to give people that perspective because that's not a huge amount of money over a 20-year period of time on a home by home basis. Commercial property is also assessed. So it's not just the homeowners who are paying for this. Next slide. So as I said, the biggest program we had is called the Rental Development Program. And we've been able to build 4,100 new affordable rental homes countywide. And what's really exciting about it is that we also, of those 4,100, about 1,200 are for extremely low income or 20% of area median income. We're really targeting that to our highest need folks. This program happened all over the county. So we have buildings going up in every single city, and you can see those round little dots there that represent all of the different projects all over the county. So you can see it was a really wide-reaching program. Next slide. And here's some examples of some of the new housing units. A couple of these are in Oakland. One of them is up in Berkeley. And we're just really excited that we could bring more housing units to the community. Next slide. And they're affordable between 20 and 60% of area median income. So Measure A1 also had a down payment assistance program. That was the second program to launch. We've already helped 200 first-time home buyers. We have a third lottery process that will be held later this year. And we expect to see, quite a few more, but it's about 200 households countywide. We're seeing quite a few folks buying in Oakland and buying in Hayward, because those are some of the places where homes are most affordable. But we're also seeing people from every city join. In order to participate in that program, you have to live or work in Alameda County. So for the vast majority of the folks, they live here and they're buying here. And our goal was really to keep our community, our tenants who want to live in Alameda County, we want to keep them here. Next slide. Oh, no, next slide. That's just those are comments. I apologize for our comments. Next slide. That's examples of first-time home buyers. Home preservation. That's the idea that a low-income homeowner who bought their home 30 years ago and can't keep up with the cost of repairs, they have the ability to make improvements. We're also allowing folks to build an accessory dwelling unit in their home. So that's also really, next slide, that's also really great. There's over 100 households. But the types of repairs that we're making, it's critical repairs, wiring, plumbing, new roofs, things like that, but it's also things like accessibility improvements. So ramps to the front door and bathroom repairs and kitchen repairs that allow someone to actually come in and, you know, add those grab bars where we stay safely housed. Next slide. The other program that we did not anticipate, but we have been able to accomplish, is the acquisition of 2 hotels in Oakland that will allow us to house 240 homeless individuals. So we purchased the old Days Hotel and the old Comfort Hotel, and between the 2 of them, we have about 243 rooms. And those projects are in the process of being converted to homeless housing, permanent supportive housing. So we're really excited about that project as well. And that was one that we did not think about at the beginning, because it was not something that people were doing. But during COVID in 2020, that became a statewide program. And so now we're seeing the ability to use and leverage state financing sources to get things like that accomplished. All right, next slide. We're going to talk a little bit about housing needs, and I'm going to run through some data very quickly, but I think it's important to understand the context of why we're in the crisis that we're in. So this is a state slide. It comes from a report that I love. I tell everybody that I love it because it's published every single year, and the data is always there if you want to look at it. It's called the Out of Reach report. And what this tells us is that in California, it costs $42. You have to earn $42.25 an hour to afford fair market rent for a 2-bedroom apartment. Wow. That's how much it costs in California. In Alameda County, it's $46. So if you want to afford a 2-bedroom apartment in Alameda County, you need to earn $46 an hour. Now, what that really means is that if you're working a minimum wage job, there's no way you can afford an apartment on your own. You have to team up with 3 or 4 other people in order to do 40 hours a week at minimum wage. But this data is really helpful because otherwise folks don't understand the context of where we're struggling. And so being able to put this in the framework that lets people know how impossible it is to actually afford, you know, what's going on in the market. Next slide. So over the last 20 years, Alameda County has grown by 230,000 households. And I think that's an also important context. Without understanding that we've grown more than we've grown the population more than we've grown or built our housing units, you can really see that we have had a huge influx of people and we've not been able to house them all. Next slide. Last slide after that one, yeah, thank you. The other thing that's really important in this slide, the far right represents an increase in higher income individuals, and the far left represents an increase in extremely low income individuals. And that middle portion is really a decrease in median income in households that are earning a median income. And so what that really says to us is that we're losing the middle class and we're increasing our extremely low income population and they're not keeping pace. And who's moving into Alameda County are higher income individuals. And I think it's also important to note that Alameda County, which is the orange bar, has seen a significantly higher increase in higher wage earners than the state overall, which is the gray bar. So in the state of California, we saw a drop in higher income households, but in Alameda County, we saw an increase. So, you know, generally we're seeing a rise of our lower income populations. Next slide, please. So RHNA RHNA stands for the Regional Housing Needs Assessment. And that's something that the state of California said every 7 years, all different cities have to build or zone for housing at a certain amount. And that's the RHNA. And every city and every county has to have what we call a housing element. It's a planning document that talks about our future growth. What's important about this slide is that you can see here that we have underbuilt for our low income population. So our RHNA was that we had to build 35,000 low income units countywide. And we are short by that by 20,000 units, meaning we only built about 15,000 over the last 20 years. Same with our 80% and even our moderate income at 120%, we underbuilt what we were supposed to build. But if you go to 120% or above, we overbuilt. We overbuilt by 25,000 units in the luxury market. And so when the market is performing without the government's subsidy or assistance, they're outperforming because they're building at that higher income level. They don't come into town to build the lower income levels. You have to woo them in. You have to woo them in with money and subsidy. And so this is how you can see that we've not kept pace with what we were supposed to have built over the last 20 years. Next slide. So what is affordable housing? I just want to clear this up. Affordable housing is affordable at many different income levels. And I'll let you know that I don't think we have enough for extremely low income populations. And I'll talk about that in just a minute, but it is generally affordable for a range of households. $20,000 to $50,000 for a single person, or $26,000 to $66,000 for a household of 3. You can see here what those rents would be. So if you're at 20%, you'd be paying about $500 for a studio, or $700 for a 2-bedroom apartment. And if you're at the higher end, you'd be paying more than that. I want to share these numbers with you in this data so you can understand what is the market rate rents, or what is the fair market rent, which is HUD's statistical analysis that tells us what you should be paying for a specific unit. And I let you know that because, as you can see here, if you're paying fair market rent, you're not, if you're at 20% of area median income, you're not going to be able to afford that. Next slide. But what about folks who are below 20% of area median income? And that's really our homeless population, our population that are at risk of homelessness, folks that are our most vulnerable populations. SSI is about $900 a month, which means that you're getting maybe $11,000 a year. How do you find a $500 a month unit? There's no way that you can get in. So what we need for our extremely low income populations is operating subsidy. Operating subsidy is intended to cover the difference between what an extremely low income household can pay at about $275 a month and what that actual cost is, which is, about $750 to $1,400 a month. And so we really need more operating subsidy. And I talk about that all the time. I think it's really important to understand that without that operating subsidy, it's very important to challenge to house our extremely low income populations. Next slide. So this slide shows us what's happened to our rental market over the last 20 years, and you can see how rents have just gone through. And I talk about this because I think it's important to understand that, and I'm not sure if I kept the homeownership slide in here, and I should have, but I think I might have deleted it, so I apologize. It's important to know that even during the foreclosure crisis in 2008 to 2012, 2013, we do not see a drop in rental rates. It consistently increased during the foreclosure crisis. So while home prices came down and we saw a significant decrease in the value of the homes, the value of rents and the cost of rent did not come down. And we've seen nothing but a steady increase in the cost of rents over the last 20 years. Next slide. And so what does that mean for a homeless household or an extremely low income household? What you can see here is the orange line, the bar, that is our increase in the homeless population numbers. Right now, at our last point in time count, we're at over 9,000 households in Alameda County, 5,000 of them here in Oakland. Our next homeless point in time count is literally in 2 weeks. So we need to staff that up. And if you want to volunteer, let Chris, Jennifer, Tony, Pauline, or I know, and we're happy to help connect you to that effort. But the green bar, the green portion of these bars represents what an extremely low income household could afford. And the red portion is what the actual rents are. So you can see that there's never been a time when an extremely low income household can afford what the regular market rate is. Next slide. And here's the ownership market. And so this is one of the things that I think it's really critical to know. This slide, like the last one, shows what a median income is and what they can afford to pay. The green portion is what they can afford to pay. And the red is the additional income needed to buy that median priced house. So basically, I'm sorry I don't have my glasses on, so I can't really read these numbers to you. But you know, in 2000, the median income was about $64,000 a year, and the median housing price now in the county was about $380,000. But you needed to earn $80,000 in order to afford that $380,000 home, which meant that the median household income could not afford the median priced home. What I'm trying to get at here is that there's only been 2 times in the last 20 years when purchasing a home was actually affordable to folks who are just earning a regular income, and that's during the foreclosure crisis. You can see that in the middle where that red is very small, and the incomes that exist in that moment could really afford that purchase price. But what's happened since the foreclosure crisis is that the real estate values have gone through the roof. And right now, the average real estate price, average home price is $1.2 million. And the income that you need to earn to afford that is over $240,000 a year. And what the average household is earning is half of that. And so essentially what we've created is this market where most people cannot afford to live here. And that's why you see so much tension and so much crisis in the real estate market. Next slide. We do have a plan for trying to end homelessness. I think it's really important that we share our Home Together plan. It exists online. St. Mary's was part of the advocacy and groups that helped support the drafting of that plan. And I'm really appreciative of Sharon and all of her feedback that went into that plan. That plan basically says that over a 5-year period, we need 17,000 new units. And so that's just letting you know that it exists. Really quickly, next slide. I've only got 1 more minute, guys. I'm like obviously not going fast enough. The Home Together plan also really makes it clear that without a significant increase in resources and investment into the homeless system, we're going to see an increasing amount of homelessness. That right now, there is not sufficient resources to curb what's going on. We are in a housing crisis, and that crisis isn't actually going to end unless we have a massive amount of new money. And so these 3 different lines essentially represent what the current trajectory is at orange versus the green trajectory, which is if you see a significant increase. The blue trajectory is just modest increases in funding for homelessness. Next slide. So the regional housing bond, Courtney did go through that. I'm not going to go through the rest of my slides, but you do have this handout which talks a little bit about what we're planning and hoping to do here in Alameda County. We've just completed quite a bit of outreach engagement. to try and bring in the thoughts of the community about priorities. And we're gonna be at the housing summit in an hour. And we'll be presenting the outcomes of all of those meetings that we've held, and I hope that you guys have a chance to watch. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was a great presentation. I'm sure everybody heard and learned a lot more than what you knew before. But I have a question for you. So on this, you want to start out Q&A part of the program, so we can be able to answer some questions.
I can be here for another 10 minutes.
Okay.
And then, but wait a minute, I have staff in the room, and so Jennifer and Tony and Pauline are here, and they can also answer questions, maybe after Chris's presentation, they can also, one of them can come up and answer questions too.
Okay, well, what we're gonna do is start our Q&A, for our program. I want everybody to know, each person who's gonna ask a question, you have 90 seconds to ask your question. And, yeah,
90 seconds.
yeah, 90 seconds to ask the question, and you have 3 minutes to respond. Now, keep in mind, St. Mary's Center, area on staff member, Rio, is gonna be our time. So if you hear this, your time is up. So our first person is gonna be Jesse Williams, a member of Council of Elders, and I'm gonna hope you just stay, Jesse.
Thank you. Hear me? First of all, I'm checking the news as it's there. I am on the council of elders here in St. Mary's. And I want to thank you guys, first of all, for coming and, listening to our voice, basically. We need people like that. When Ruby first introduced this bill to me, it reminded me of something. It's almost like I remember going through this, so I didn't go research online, looking for bills that have passed in the last, let's say, 20 years. And there's been a few. So the one thing I had not, so there's been a few, but the one thing I had not dealt is the power on any of these deals. So my question for you is, what is different with this particular deal that's going to be personally a benefit for me?
Thank you, I appreciate that. So I'm trying to get into the chat. Let's see, can I find a way to get into the chat?
And Michelle, when you were doing your presentation, you did cover some of the questions that I had until you got to the point about what housing was allotted to what people. That was, I think that's my biggest, that was right to the problem.
That gets to the heart of the question. So we have funded over 4,100 new units in Alameda County. And I just put in the chat a link to our Measure A1 outcomes report, which tells you exactly what we did with the money and how much we accomplished. I hit some of those slides, but that website is way more detailed, and I encourage you to take a look at it. It's got details for every single project and who we're trying to serve in each building, because not every building serves every population. So for instance, seniors, when you build a senior housing project, it's for seniors only, right? Whereas you can also build a family housing project, either senior or family. Family means anybody can live there. In a family housing project, you can also have seniors, but you can also have children. So we have both types of housing throughout the whole system. Not every building has been completed yet. Some of them are in pre-development still, but we have over 2,800 units that are either completed or in construction. So we've been getting a lot done. As far as outcomes of who lives in every building, I have statistics, but I don't have them on me. So I'll make sure the website has sort of a report out of, population demographics. And that's something Jennifer and team, we can start thinking about how to report out on a little bit better, because we do have the lease up information. But that website's amazing. We just launched it about 4 months ago, and I really hope that you take a look at
I
it.
certainly will, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Stephanie. Okay, we have next up Vice President of the Council of Elders here at St. Mary's Center and a member of our Hope and Justice team, Ann Bradley.
I'm Ann Bradley, and I'm Vice President on the Council of Elders here at St. Mary's. Thank you for coming here today and answering our questions and explaining how everything works at your level. I want to know, how does the county plan to address transitional housing, which has been so important during this homeless crisis? And will they be open to funding the rehabilitation of buildings for this purpose and also preserving SROs?
Yes. Yes, all of those questions. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about transitional housing. The Federal Department of Housing and Urban Development actually deprioritized transitional housing about 20 years ago. And so what they did is they started saying, let's do permanent supportive housing. And so permanent supportive housing has been the focus of our system, but we don't have enough money to build everything that we need, and we are critically lacking transitional housing. And so one of the things that we've heard from the community, and we'll talk again about this at the Housing Summit, is the need for, you know, homeless shelters and transitional housing before people get to the permanent supportive housing. And so that mid station, that midway point, we still believe in housing first, but we also believe that it's important to shelter those who are most in need and who are out on the streets and get them out of harm's way. So it's critically important that we also fund the construction of new types of housing. And so you'll see when we do this talk later this afternoon, that one of the programs we've heard about is the idea of, you know, using our money to build safe parking, to build transitional housing, to do new navigation centers. These funds can only be used on capital, sticks, bricks, land acquisition. They can't be used for program. And so correspondingly, we need to find resources to cover the operations of transitional housing or shelter. And that's money that we haven't identified yet, but it's still.
Could it come from the private sector?
It could always come from the private sector. If we can get, like Santa Clara and San Mateo County have a lot of investment from, you know, foundations. It would be lovely if they decided to come here as well. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ian. Everybody having a good time?
Yeah.
We have one more person. It's gonna be Vice President, he's gonna be Secretary of the Council of Elders and a member of our Hope and Justice team, Brenda Winfield.
And introduction. President, thank you so much for coming. And it's still time for you to say good morning. Question, I want to know, will you plan to return to St. Mary's Center to share how what we said today is included in the bond?
I'm more than happy to come back. And what we're doing is a community outreach engagement program, and we're both gonna present what we heard from the community today at the Housing Summit, but we're also planning to go to the Health Committee of the Board of Supervisors for a public meeting, and I'm happy to bring more information out to community groups. Me or my team can come to any of these formats or forums, that's the word, that you want to host. We'd be happy to come.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you, and thank you for coming. Have a great day.
Thank you, and I am gonna dash, so I just want to say thank you all. Thank you, Michelle. Thank you. Great job, Brenda. Thank you. Applause please for our questions. I'm Sharon, I work here at St. Mary's Center, and Michelle, I want to make sure that what Jesse Williams was asking translated for everybody, because the question really is, we've gone to the court, we've had housing initiatives. How is this one going to focus on people with the greatest need? And for that answer, we'd love you to come back, like Brenda Whitfield invited.
at any time.
Right, we're gonna be taking all of this public feedback and we'll be making the final decision about priorities. And I encourage everyone to participate in those public meetings because the board does want to hear from everyone. And what I'm presenting to the board are my recommendations that are coming from these public meetings. And one of the things that we've heard is help the homeless, help those that are most vulnerable, help those that are most in need. So communicating that to the board is important, but when they make their final decision, they need to hear from all of you. So I encourage you all to come and show up at those meetings.
So I'm gonna ask, this is unplanned. I'm gonna ask for a show of hands. Who's willing to come with St. Mary's to the Board of Supervisors to make sure that they hear us? Anybody else willing to go to the Board of Supervisors? Put the hands up high, hands up high, yes, all right. Okay, so we're gonna make a date and we're gonna come. Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you very much.
Keith, I apologize, thank you.
Before our executive director, okay, so thank you again, Michelle, for your participation here today. So we're gonna move on in our program for our next guest speaker, Chris Norman, Chief of Staff for the City of Oakland, to tell us what he has planned for the City of Oakland in 2024. Chris.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Michelle. Appreciate it. How's the sound? Is it good? Awesome. So thank you all so much for being here. Everyone just stretch a little bit. Raise your hands up. On Zoom too. Stretch a little bit. I do. Always good to have a little break. But yes, my name is Chris Norman. I work for the City of Oakland's Housing and Community Development Department. I'm the Chief of Staff. I've been with the city for about 2.5 years at this point. But my whole career, I've worked in affordable housing, specifically for folks who are most in need, low-income folks, communities of color, et cetera, here in the Bay Area. So before I go into the presentation itself, I do want to share a little bit about myself and my family because it's extremely relevant to the work that I do on a daily basis and the conversation here today. I grew up extremely low income in San Francisco, born and raised in the Mission District. And my parents, were absolutely fully loving, did their best to make sure that we had what we needed. But we, we're on Section 8. We were pushed around by the system often. And I, this is not just a job for me in housing, this is my life. And for my parents, I see both of them actually have very different outcomes. My mom still has her Section 8 one-bedroom unit. Because of that, she has some stability. She's turning 70 this year. She has health workers come support her. She's not worried about the day-to-day. My father, unfortunately, passed away about almost 3 years ago now. And in the last 2 or 3 years of his life, he was on and off unhoused, living in the garage when he could, living in his car, eating McDonald's, frequently because that's what he could access and afford. And I very much believe that because of the lack of stability, the housing that he did not have, that led to sped up his health deterioration and led to him passing away. So this is extremely personal to me. This is my life. I know this is not a joke. We hear all of these huge numbers, $10 billion, $20 billion, and we're like, what does that mean? I can't even imagine that, right? But I just wanted to give that background because everything that we're talking about, and everything that I'm going to go over today, has that kind of thing in mind. Is how do we make sure that our people are able to not just thrive, but also stay healthy and be able to have some stability. So thank you for listening to that and a little bit of my background. What I want to share today, and you see on the screen, is I'm here to talk about the City of Oakland's racial equity framework for how we will develop affordable housing. We created this framework last year. We released it last June of 2023, and it has transformed into the Housing Department's 4-year strategic action plan. So that action plan was developed using this process that you see on the screen. I'll walk you through it very briefly, but it's called a racial equity impact analysis. For those in the room who might not be as clear, right? We use racial equity very specifically as opposed to a word like equality, right? Where equality, everyone gets the same resources, but in an equitable world, in an equitable way of doing work, people get what they need in order to thrive, survive, succeed, etc. Right? When we talk about racial equity, that means every specific racial group gets what they need to survive, to thrive, succeed, etc. So when it comes to housing, we have to first ask ourselves, and the first item up here is, before we get into details, just use your imaginations. What do you want to see? What would a world look like? And it's not lost on me that we're here for the MLK celebration either. And MLK Day was this past Monday. A lot of it is about imagining, envisioning. What is the world you want to see?
Not all these big buildings. Hey, I don't see that in my opinion.
I don't want to see vacant buildings either. Absolutely.
Make them steady cash flow bills.
Steady cash. Okay.
Oh, I mean.
I appreciate that. But no, so in our process, we did quite a bit of community engagement. And at the bottom of the screen here, we named what our goal and vision was. Through our dollars, our money, my department, Housing Community Development Department of Oakland, we want to promote housing access for and stop the displacement of Oaklanders most impacted by racial disparities. What's key about that, most impacted by disparities, is that we need to look at every separate topic, right? If you look at homelessness in Oakland, the Black population in Oakland is about 22–23%. But the Black population of homeless folks in Oakland is about 59–60%. That is a huge disparity, and it is by far the clearest example of why we need to focus on closing those racial disparities. So what I just shared right there is actually step number 2. It's gather the necessary data to understand what the current situation is. So as I said, Black folks are disproportionately represented in Oakland's unhoused population. Makes it very clear for us where the focus should be. So step number 3 in this racial equity impact analysis that we took, we wanted to identify, we wanted to talk to groups, talk to a number of stakeholders to figure out how do we respond to this. Now that we know our vision and we know where we are, how do we close that gap to help us get towards that goal? And we had, from January of 2023 through May of 2023 last year, we had conversations with, probably over 300, 400 people all together really to help us design and craft our solutions. And that was step number 4. Then step number 5 is ongoing accountability to make sure that we're on track and that we're reaching our goals. So I'll talk a little bit more about what those all look like in action, but I wanted to say that first because it's really important. When we talk about who's actually most affected, we have to be very clear because we're talking about millions of dollars. People don't just let that go. They don't just give you millions of dollars. We have to be very clear what our need is and very clear what our ask is. The next slide. There's a whole bunch of information here. I will say, if you have access to the internet, search Oakland Housing and Community Development. You'll go to our website and you can see our strategic action plan and a PowerPoint presentation. You can see all of this in more detail. I really wanted to keep it short for here today. But there's a number of pieces here that go into our data gathering that talk about why we're focusing on things that we do. As I mentioned, the Black population in Oakland is disproportionately represented in homelessness. And as Michelle mentioned earlier, Alameda County at large has about 9,000 unhoused individuals, and over half of them are here in Oakland specifically. That means the need is here where we are now. And we see that, we know that. And there's another piece here, item 5, centering racial equity in homeless system design. That was really impactful because what that report did is it looked at Oakland and Berkeley specifically and tried to get a sense of why people become homeless. It listed 9 factors ranging from a lack of income, to inability to keep stable housing, to mass incarceration, to low education. It was very helpful to see all of that research laid out, and it helped us inform our plans. The last thing I'll say here, Michelle also mentioned a regional housing needs allocation, RHNA. That's the goal that each city has to develop a certain number of housing units in an 8-year period. We just started an 8-year period between 2023 and 2031. In this time, Oakland is expected to develop about 10,200 low-income housing units. That's a lot of units. And one more fact than that is right now, the average cost to develop one apartment is about $800,000. $800,000 to develop one apartment, one unit. And we need to build 10,200. I don't have the math right on top of my head, but it's not easy. I'll move on to the next slide. So, one of the challenges that we face is that we don't have enough funding to reach the goal. I wish we did, and that's partially why we're here to talk to you all today, is to talk to you about the opportunity you have this coming November to vote for a regional bond that'll help us get that money so we can get closer to that goal. We recognize that everything will change, everything changes every year. The money we have available, the politicians that are in office that can make decisions, and the people living their lives, everything changes. So what we wanted to do was to develop a set of guiding principles that no matter what, we're going to do our best to follow them, those principles, and to make sure we're on track. I'm not going to read all of them, but to highlight a few, we want to make sure that we're rooting every decision that we have in racial equity and in data to make sure we're addressing the need that is clearest. We want to make sure that we leverage all funding sources, and that means our dollars that we put into affordable housing, we want to make sure we're partnering with the state, with the federal government, with private philanthropy, as someone mentioned earlier. Our dollars shouldn't be the only ones going to address this crisis. This is a group effort. We need to find joint solutions. I want to highlight number 6, simultaneous investment. We're going to do our best to fund this work, but also advocate for systems change. Right now, it's really hard to get funding for affordable housing in general, but from the state especially. Projects from all over the state, from Los Angeles to name a city, somewhere up in the farther north. Every city has projects that are competing for the same small pool of funding in the state. And right now, we have to make sure that we are competitive and we are getting our needs met. So we're going to do our best to fund what we can, but also make sure that the policies meet our needs that are in Oakland. So all of that comes together: the data, the guiding principles, the fact that it's $800,000 a unit. The question is, so what are we doing? How do we use that to address homelessness? The next slide will show that. So us at the Housing Community Development Department in Oakland, we created this kind of waterfall graphic to describe how we're going to prioritize our money to make sure that it goes to meet the needs of people that are most in need. So based on everything we talked about, we named the development of units and people exiting homelessness, permanent supportive housing, other like those units. That's our first priority. We're going to do our best to build as many units as possible for people so that they can exit homelessness and have somewhere stable to live. We are limited with how much we can actually develop that because, as I mentioned earlier, right, $800,000 per unit, that's just to build the unit. To keep it affordable, ongoing, another couple $100,000, right? We need to make sure we have that funding source, operating subsidy, we call it. It's not readily available. So we can only build so much, but we're going to build as much as we can. Once we maximize the number of units that are available to people exiting homelessness, we're going to look at the rest of the low-income units that we can build that might not be as deep ongoing support subsidy, but we still want to make sure that it's accessible to people, making what we say is 30 to 80% of the area median income. That's a lot of, families, maybe individuals working average wage jobs. We need that kind of support too. Now, this is a bit of a change for us in the city of Oakland. In the past, we haven't necessarily prioritized how we're going to spend this funding. We kind of put a little bit here, a little bit there, a little bit there, right? But when you do that, when you spread the money so thin, it's hard to make an impact on any one thing. So that's why we're really saying out loud, confidently, clearly that we are focusing in the city of Oakland on addressing homelessness as our first priority. Now, what that means though, on the other hand, is that there are some things that we do not prioritize as part of our plan. It doesn't mean that they're not important. It doesn't mean that we don't need it. But what it means is if I have only $10 today, what am I going to put that towards, right? So, that means on the bottom, you'll see something like first-time home buyer support and some rehabilitation of single-family homes. I'm not saying those aren't important, but from an equity perspective, when I'm thinking about who has the biggest need, we need to make sure our folks are off the street, have somewhere, have a roof over their heads, and have somewhere to call home. And again, I'm a renter myself. My family, we don't own homes. We haven't been able to get there yet. I would love to be able to own a home, right? But the need right now is so clear that we need to do right by our community members. So we've gotten pushback on this. A lot of folks have said generational wealth building through home ownership is the #1 priority. That's how we get to a new standard of life. And I agree, it is such a priority, but it's a priority that we have to think about how to use our partnerships to reach there. When we have scarce dollars, I only got $10 today. I'm gonna put it towards addressing homelessness. So the next slide, the last slide, I wanted to keep this short. A whole bunch of numbers. I like numbers, y'all might not like numbers, I'm sorry. But what this does show you is that with our current dollars in the city of Oakland, that very bottom right number, with our current dollars, we have about $470 million over the next 4 years. Again, that sounds like a lot. It's not a lot. It'll only build about 2,734 units of housing. 2,734 units of housing when the need over 8 years is 10,200. So that is a clear reason why we need support, not only from you all, but your community, your family, all over the region to vote for this bond in November 2024 with the Bay Area Housing Finance Authority. Because what that'll do is that it could double or even triple that number we have on the screen. It's imperative that we do that we work together to get the word out. We're doing the best we can, and this is a group effort and something that we need your help with. So I'll stop there, but thank you so much for having me today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much. That was great. So are you ready to ask some questions? Okay, so we're gonna go on the second part of our program, and we're gonna have 3 people come up and ask questions. Now, remember, you have 90 seconds to ask your question, and you hear a real seminary thing, staff, and that means your time is up. You're gonna have 3 minutes to answer each question. So our first person is going to be Lee Williams, seminary center, Oakland Justice.
Great right now. That is a great presentation. I have a question for you. And if you don't mind, I'd like to say this.
Please.
But my question for you is, how can we make affording housing affordable? I love when you gave your story, where you came from. But I came from there too. I was homeless too. And I went to shelters and had to get a program. I got affordable housing now.
Congratulations.
But my heart goes out. My heart goes out to the one that's still out there. My heart goes out. You ignore it. You know, what can we do? to get this man off the bench. He's right outside the door. You know, you see him, right inside here. You see him. So all that good stuff you were talking about, I need you. We need you for this stuff. We program. It's not just me, and it's not just Chris. It's not just St. Mary, but it's a we. This is for the whole community, the whole region. This is a we program. And what I need to say is, we, Chris, you talk about that money, and you said it was low. We need to really get in our hearts what we're gonna do with that money and how we're gonna benefit the people. You know, this is what it's all about. It's not just it's not just people out there. There's men out there sick. You know, they're getting social on fixed incomes, and the rent is 3 times as much as their income, and they're in shelter. There's families, there's hungry children out there. You see what I'm saying? There's people on drugs out there. So the problem is big. So we need to get this. We need to get out and vote. We need to do what we need to do. Not just me, not just Chris. Because Chris said a lot of good things. We need to back him up and make sure it gets done.
No, I mean, there's so much to say there. The one thing that I want to highlight is that this is both a short-term opportunity and a long-term gain, right? The long-term gain is what we're talking about today in many cases, and thinking about a year from now, 2 years from now, how do we get the big dollars that we need to actually make a change? But we also can't wait years down the line when there's people outside right now who need help, right? And that's that's number one, the dollar here today. That's not a small deal. I do want to thank you for being here and being part of that conversation, because this means you're interested. A lot of people don't even want to talk about this. That hurt my heart. But I think we need to be educated, number one, so that everything that you heard today, you can take and continue to spread those messages and share the opportunity. That's one of the most important things you can do to make sure that we can make that change. And at the same time, right, it's actually next Thursday, a week from today, is the 2024 point in time count in Alameda County. That's an opportunity where you can go out, I think it's between 5 and 10 a.m. It's early, but it's important, right? To go and help figure out how can we get an accurate count of unhoused folks on our streets. It's not just that we have the number in our heads, but the number that we get from those days will help us figure out plans and strategies for many years to come. Right, so pay attention to those opportunities. Again, next Thursday, the 25th, the point in time count's happening. It's going to help us really think about where we need to go moving forward. Thank you for that question.
Thank you very much, Lee. So next we have Lillian Walker. St. Mary's Temple from Texas.
Is what can we do to cut the red tape around affordable housing? You know, we got involved in the past some issues and stuff like that, but we still have the hang-ups about the red tape. You know what I'm saying? And that's you know, I saw 20 smoke shops in 4 months, whereas I only seen 1 housing unit open up. You know what I'm saying? And I think that's sad, you know, we still got people laying on the sidewalks and stuff like that. Why are you gonna, you know, let businesses open up that have paraphernalia, and you have people who are living on the street using paraphernalia? That's my concern. Thank you.
Thank you. And I live off of Telegraph, so I see a lot of what you're talking about. That's my neighborhood. I get that. And I will let you know that and this is not something, you know, we don't necessarily are good job of articulating and communicating this, but at least in the city of Oakland, we're very aware of all of the red tape that exists. The city and the mayor Tao, they just hired a staff person whose specific job is to figure out between our departments how to make sure that we can speed up permitting for affordable housing, get more bills without that red tape as much as possible, right? So our folks in the city, they're aware of it. It's not, you know, city government, we've been around for a long time. It's like a big knot. And our job every single day is to hug a little bit more to make that out, right? But I also, you know, it all has to do with, it's hard to get affordable housing because when you want to get that subsidy, you have to prove your income, you have to prove who else on the lease, all of these things, and those questions can also feel really invasive. I experienced that myself. And I think that is why organizations like St. Mary's Center and others are so critical in helping people figure out how to navigate that whole world. We need to continue to support these organizations, support people, make sure they can figure out how to reach those barriers past them. And you know, our job as a city is to think about not just how we fund at large, but how we support this kind of support services as well. So so much more to say. Thank you for that question.
Thank you very much, William. Okay, last but not least, we have Council of Elders member and Hope and Justice member, Paul Hopkins.
My name is Jack Hopkins. My question is, will you plan to come back to St. Mary's to share what we have said today is included in the bond?
I love that. Thank you. So yes, is the answer. As Michelle and the Alameda County HCD staff mentioned, they've been doing a lot of community engagement around this bond so far. And we are hoping to take a lot of the learning that they've done, and we're going to have an Oakland specific community engagement sessions, probably in March, April, and May, where we talk about Oakland specific issue. I don't think we mentioned in this bond, if it is passed, Alameda County is going to get its own allocation, but because Oakland is one of the 3 largest cities in the Bay Area, Oakland specifically will also get its own allocation. If it's a $10 billion bond, that means $380 million specifically to Oakland. If it's a $20 billion bond, that means we're going to get something, what is that? So like 760 million. And that's huge, right? We are a part of the larger Alameda County, so we have to think about how our programs support each other and align. Whereas in the city of Oakland, we might be focused on addressing homelessness as our number 1 issue. We will look to partners like the county to think about how can we support first-time home buyer pieces that we can't necessarily, we're not prioritizing in our plan, but we know are still important. And there's other resources to use for our partners. So there's Oakland specific engagement sessions coming up this spring. That'll be a perfect time to continue this conversation and make sure that your feedback and voices are heard and part of our plan. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Paul. Well, thank you very much for your cooperation, your participation today, and helping us get a little bit better understanding and to speak about what's going on. So, with all of that information, I think it's time that we made a call for action. And so for that, we have Leadership Academy 2 graduate, Sheila Gary.
Hold the mic. I have a couple of people. Good morning. First of all, can I get all of you to stand up? Can I get all of you to stand up? Hold the mic, Sheila. Sheila, you gotta hold the mic for the people online. Can you stand up a moment, please? And can I speak to this smile? We're talking about something that's very important, but we're talking about solutions. So my next thing I want you to do is take a deep breath hold it a minute, and release it slowly. You may sit down. What I'm saying today, I'm supposed to get energized and excited about the process of voting. So we make sure that this initiative passes. And I'm going to give you a little history about me. I am a teacher. I'm a registered nurse. But more importantly, I'm a human being, and I'm a person who lives in Alameda County. So I see what the county is going to do. I see a need for what we're doing today. When I first started voting, I voted because my parents voted. And it was a necessity. There's no way you weren't gonna go back to Orange Tippet's house and not have your little sticker that said vote, okay? And she always, and my dad emphasized, what happened before we were able to vote and how important it was to honor those who had fought so hard for the privilege of us to vote. But as I've gotten older, I've assessed why I vote. I vote now because I know I make a difference. I'm one person, and I hear today a lot of people say, I don't vote because my one vote doesn't count. But let me tell you, if you had a tie, you would only need one person to break that tie. If you had $499,000 and I gave you $1, you would have $500,000. That would be $500,000. If someone right now needed CPR, and since I'm a registered nurse, I could do this, me, one person, save that person's life. So the number one is important, and it becomes imperative at the time of voting. So with my students, I always put something together to make them remember. So I took the word vote, and I took the V and I said verbalize. I took the O and I said once. I took the T and I said truth. And I took the E and I said emphasize. So what I want everybody in here to do is VOTE and remember that you count and your vote counts. And another thing that is in the harbor here at St. Mary's is you're going to have a speaker bureau training session. And if you want more information, because we don't have the data yet, I want you to see Ruby or some of the staff that's involved in that. But what are we going to do? Vote. How important is our vote? And you know, with one person, it could make a difference. So enjoy the rest of your day and thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, you're getting down to the end of our program. I have one more speaker, Ms. Brown, is going to say a few words before we close out.
Hello, my name is Mary Brown, and I assured them that I would take not even a minute. I just want you guys to know that I went to City Council to speak on behalf of homelessness. And I waited over 4 hours, maybe like 4 hours and 37 minutes. And I was really looking forward to my 2 minutes. However, they cut it down to 1 minute. I wasn't too happy. A friend of mine was with me. He had just gotten out of the hospital. And I told him I will be back. I'm not going to stop talking. Let your voices be heard. If it had not been for St. Mary's and Lifelong, it would have been a very, very tough journey. So I appreciate everybody. I want you to know I will not go away. I will continue to talk. Thank you.
Very much, Ms. Brown. So I hope everybody heard something here today that has inspired you to want to get out and vote. want to advocate on a much higher level. In closing, I would like everyone to intentionally on purpose. Have a beautiful rest of your day. My name is Speaker Ribbon Wine, and I'm the president of the Council of Elders here at St. Mary's Center. And please believe me when I tell you how much I have really appreciated the privilege of your time. Thank you all very much. Please.